Hello everyone. Good afternoon. Noon already. Thank you for joining early. Cindy Richards. Hi Jenny. Hello. Good afternoon everyone. How are you? Hello everyone. I am Dr. Adrian Tikolo. I'm usually called Dr. Aydee. Nice to see you. Good afternoon, everyone. What an audacious time. The elections is tomorrow. And we're all looking forward to that, aren't we? Nice to see you. Hi, Timmy. Hello. Good afternoon. So today, I don't have a guest. You're stuck with just me. I'm actually going to be talking about assessments. Now, I've been getting, quite a number of inquiries, and people are wondering, what does an assessment look like, a dyslexia diagnostic assessment? What does it look like? Is it like a medical test? Do you wire people up to a machine? What you're checking? Is it like an MRI? What happens in an assessment room? Seems like a lot of people are wondering. But before we go there, tomorrow is election day. I'm sure you have your PVC. You need to go out there and make that vote count. I just thought it's important to put that out there. It's our civic duty, and we must ensure that we exercise that franchise. All right, so today we're talking dyslexia assessments. Why do we need dyslexia assessments? What happens during the dyslexia assessment? What are we looking for? What do we aim to do? What happens when you receive the report? How do you interpret that report? And then what do you do going forward? So those are basically what we'll be looking at today. Again, thank you for joining, and welcome. So, what are the reasons why, people request for assessments, especially diagnostic assessments? And what I found in my practice is usually when a child is struggling in school, when a child, you believe is smart enough to learn, is smart enough to do what other children are doing, but still struggles with reading and learning to write and spell. And you've tried a few things. You have lesson teachers, you have extra time in school, you have support in school, and yet the child is still struggling. In fact, I find a lot of parents that say, look, he has had lesson teachers from when he was 4 years old till now, and I don't know how many lesson teachers are fired. I think the school isn't doing enough. And there's always this concern when the child is struggling as to what more can be done. So that's one of the reasons why people get assessments, especially schools when they refer students for assessment. It's basically because the child is struggling and they want to find out how to help and support the child. And I'll talk about assessments in itself thereafter. Then I also find those that the children, they didn't seem to be struggling when they were in primary school. They seem to get by okay, but now they're in secondary school. It just seems like they're not doing as well. And the concerns usually happens when the exams have happened, and then you have the report sheet or the report card, and you're having a look at this report card and you're thinking, this is not a reflection of this child. And the child is like, Mommy, I did my best, I tried hard, but the exam report is not translating to what you expect. And then you begin to wonder if something is wrong. And so, when people have that concern and then come across some of the signs of dyslexia, and then they think, oh my goodness, this might be my child or myself. And then they request an assessment. Other times you find an adult has been struggling at work. He or she doesn't think that they're dyslexic, but they just find that they can't keep up with time at work. They have all these ideas, they have difficulty putting them down. they hate writing, they're not doing well with time management, and even their reading is not up to par. But they just always felt that, well, I mean, this is how I am. But again, they come across somehow some of the signs of dyslexia and they think, oh my goodness, this describes me. Am I dyslexic? And so they request an assessment. And then I've also had much older people who are in their 60s, even in their 70s, that feel, look, I just want to know that all my life I haven't been dumb as people have thought, and that it was just, a difficulty I had that wasn't recognized. I just want to know. So there are different reasons why people get dyslexia assessments done, especially diagnostic dyslexia assessment. But for the most part, it's largely because there's a child in school. We've noticed the child is struggling in some way, especially with reading and writing, and that the child is not doing as well. And we just want to know, is this dyslexia? Because if it is, then there has to be a particular way that we deal with this. It's like if you have a fever, for instance, and you've got high temperature, you've got aches in your body, you've got vomiting and throwing up generally. You want to be certain what it is so you know how to, treat it. And the doctor will usually recommend some tests that you need to do. It's almost the same thing, except that dyslexia, of course, is education. It's not a medical problem. But you find that you need to look at, to be certain that this is dyslexia, so you know what remedy to apply. When you have parents say, look, I have lesson teachers, I have all these resources. I mean, when he comes back from school or she comes back from school, we go over everything again, and by tomorrow she's forgotten, she's still having difficulty. It's because the remedy that they're applying is probably not the right one. If you have malaria and you are taking medication for typhoid fever, it might not work. So there are various reasons why people get diagnostic assessments done. But largely because you want to get support and the right type of support. So dyslexia diagnostic assessments basically give like a clear indication whether a person is dyslexic or not. It leads to a diagnosis, and that's why we call it a diagnostic assessment. So it leads to a diagnosis and helps us tell that these are the things we need to be doing. In addition to that, dyslexia runs on a continuum. So it can be mild to severe. You want to know, what level it's at and what the person is struggling with the most. Because at the end of the day, the whole idea is that you can plan an intervention, okay? You want to know which area the person is struggling with so that you can plan an intervention that will work. Diagnostic assessment is so important because without that, you can be doing the same thing the same way and you're never going to get results. Year in, year out, the person will continue to struggle. Yes, sometimes to find little strategy, but they would definitely be operating far, far below their potential. Okay, so diagnostic assessments are important. They help us, with knowledge of how to support the child or the adult or the student in particular. Okay, so what do we look at? I have some slides in front of me, but again, I can't share that with you. I hope that I can at some other time, maybe on our page. But the aim of a formal diagnosis of dyslexia is to help us find what are the areas of weaknesses and what are the areas of strength that a person has. So we want to remediate the weaker areas, bring them to, to fruition, bring them to higher levels. And we want to use their strengths to do this. So it's important that we know what their weaknesses are and what their strengths are and what style works for them, okay? We also want to collect information about their attainment. How are they doing now? How are they achieving? What's their level in reading, writing, spelling, in in composition, in comprehension. What are their levels? And I'll talk about the levels in a bit, and exactly what goes on in the assessment room. But basically, we're trying to find, how do you process information? How do you process language? We want to find, what is your current attainment now? Is it average? Is it below average? Is it above average? Does it look like you're having struggles? And in which areas are you having struggles? We also want to be able to see if there are other factors that are affecting their learning. So diagnostic, again, assessments are really, really important. Even for somebody in the workplace, we want to see, how do you help yourself be better at work, but also how do you adjust your work schedules, your workspace, to help you be your better self. So diagnostic dyslexia assessments are extremely important in getting the right support for a person. Now, what exactly goes on? What do we do in a dyslexia assessment? I'll first of all tell you what dyslexia is again, because that in itself explains what we need to do. So basically, dyslexia is a specific learning difficulty, that is present at birth. It's inherited, and affects phonological awareness, processing speed, working memory, rapid naming, and doesn't usually match up to the level of the person's intelligence. So we're looking at some specific areas when it comes to assessment for dyslexia. We're looking at specific areas, okay? We're looking at what we call phonological processing. This is important because one of the basic difficulties that people with dyslexia have is a lack of phonological awareness and phonological memory. So you have a situation where you have a letters and sound. We know that this is the basis of learning to read, right? So letters and sounds, but you need to be able to associate that and manipulate that throughout language. So whether you're reading, whether you're writing, whether you're speaking, you're actually manipulating those words and those sounds and the letters, and in different forms. That is one basic thing that dyslexics find difficult to do. Now, I don't need to go into the science of that, or has to do with the phonological loop in the brain and all of that. But put that aside, we have a problem with phonological awareness. Basically, that's one of the main problems, especially when they're young. So you want to look at what's the level of phonological awareness. You also want to look at, phonological processing and verbal memory. So how quickly are you processing information? And how quickly can you bring back information? We want to look at that as well. We also want to look at working memory, because dyslexia can affect working memory. Now, working memory is a part of your whole memory, okay? You have short-term memory and working memory. So short-term memory is a memory that you use to hold information, just as it is for a short period of time. So if I gave you, say, some numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I tell you, okay, you're going to have to tell me these numbers back in 30 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then I tell you to tell me back. You just hold it in your memory for that point in time. You give me back. That's just, you're using a short-term memory. Okay. Now you have what we call working memory. And this is really just the simplest form I can put it. So you have working memory where you need to hold the information in your memory for a little bit, manipulate the information, and then give it back. Now that working memory, short-term memory and working memory in particular, is what you use especially when you're learning, or people are talking to you, or even now you're using your working memory because you're taking in information, but you're trying to move it around and do something with the information, either so you can remember it later on, or you can give the information back. So if I gave you some numbers, say 5, 6, 2, and then I told you, all right, turn it backwards and tell me the numbers backwards. You first need to hold that number in your memory and then think of how to turn it backwards. Now, that's you would have to use your working memory for that. Now, working memory is so important when it comes to learning. And working memory is one of the areas that dyslexics struggle with. So you're looking at trying to see how well or how strong the working memory of the person is. So you're also looking at working memory. And this, of course, is going to determine the psychometric tests that you put together when you're trying to do a dyslexia assessment. So you're looking at all those phonological processing, but you're also looking at, so I've talked about working memory, I've talked about processing speed, I've talked about phonological awareness. I also need to talk about rapid naming. This is how quickly, again, like I said, you can take up information and bring it back quickly. Rapid naming is so important that some people have a difficulty with rapid naming and phonological awareness, and that is what we call like a double deficit when you have dyslexia. It even makes the dyslexia more profound. But over the years, even researchers have found that there are even more things that come into play. And so we look at dyslexia now as a multi-deficit. But in as much as it helps us to identify what areas to address when we're doing an assessment and then when we want to plan an intervention. So aside from that, we want to look at your underlying ability. What is the ability? What's your level of ability now? And this is usually verbal and visual, what we call crystallized or fluid, intelligence. We want to see how intelligent you are and your capacity to learn. Now, we know that dyslexic individuals have average to high intelligence, and that's why many times you find people say, but this child is really intelligent. He speaks so smartly, he knows so many things. I don't know why he's struggling with his reading. Of course, because dyslexia does not affect intelligence. We expect that your level of intelligence is at least average. It's not to say that people with lower levels of intelligence cannot have dyslexia. They can. Everybody can have dyslexia across the intelligence spectrum. However, if a person has low intelligence, that veers to what we call intellectual disability, along a range that we call from about 75 downwards, then learning anything, inclusive of adapting to life itself, becomes more difficult. And so dyslexia would not be the only thing that the person will be struggling with. Intellectual disability can also go from mild to profound, and that's on a different level. So we usually expect that dyslexics have average to high intelligence. So what's the level of intelligence you have? When you're doing an assessment, you want to be certain that the person is intelligent enough to, and that low intelligence is not the problem here. Okay, so again, you throw in an intelligence test, the visual test, verbal and visual. So we're testing the use of language and other fluid of visual intelligence, that is things that you might have learned from your environment, that wasn't taught to you in a structured environment like a school or some sort of tuition. So you're looking at verbal information and visual information. So again, we throw in, an intelligence test to see what is the level of your intelligence, okay? And are you intelligent enough to learn? In my practice, again, dyslexics have average to high intelligence. I have seen some dyslexics that have lower intelligence, but many times they have more profound difficulties that learning to read seems to be the least of the problem, okay? Then you want to look at what the current attainment is. So you want to do a full diagnostic spelling test. You want to do reading, writing, comprehension. You want to look at reading speed. How quickly does the person read? The idea is if your fluency is low, it would impound your comprehension. So if you read too slowly, you'll be using a lot of your brain power to decode those words, and then by the time you get to the end of what you're reading, you would have forgotten because you won't remember, so you won't comprehend. And the whole idea of reading is to comprehend the material. There's no point just trying to read and not want to understand. So you also then want to see what is the level of attainment for this person. So when you're doing a dyslexia assessment, you're putting together all of the psychometric tests, and there are quite a few of them out there. Again, the assessor would determine the best ones for the person. I think at this point I have to say that dyslexia assessments are in the domain of someone that is trained to do it. you have to be a specialist dyslexia assessor or an educational psychologist with a bias to dyslexia, because educational psychologists are great. They're more generalists. Okay, so you're looking at dyslexia, you want to look at, someone that has a specialty in the area of assessing dyslexia. And it's very easy to misdiagnose or misrepresent if you don't know what you're doing. There are a lot of dyslexia screeners out there. The screeners are good because, they can show that a person has a risk of dyslexia or is showing signs of dyslexia. However, they don't do enough screeners. So a lot of the screeners you see online, take this test now, or a simple test that someone can just do, there are a few screeners out there. But the problem with screeners is that they only look at specific areas for a very short time, and they don't address all of the areas that are important for when you're addressing, dyslexia. And so you have a lot of false positives and also false negatives. So sometimes they can say that a person is dyslexic when they're not, or that a person isn't when clearly they are, but they haven't looked at all of the areas. Now, you need to be trained, you need to be certified to do a dyslexia assessment. That's important, okay? So now the assessor would determine what you need, what is required, what psychometric tests are required. And this is where I have to say that dyslexia is an educational problem. It's not a medical one, and therefore you do not need it's not like a diagnostic medical test where we're not taking any blood samples, nothing of the sort. It's largely educational. We're working with paper and biro, and different tests, maybe puzzles and different memory things, and then we're also doing reading, writing, spelling, and all of that. So it's basically education. And in fact, when I'm doing dyslexia assessments, I tell parents sometimes they can just come and peep and have a look at what we're doing so that they understand what the process is like. It's basically, reading, writing, spelling, writing. It's largely educational. You're using psychometric tests to decipher the information that you require. So we're looking at reading. A lot of the attainment tests, you'll be looking at reading comprehension, listening comprehension. You'll be looking at reading fluency, decoding, phonological processing skills, oral language. You'll be looking at reading, writing, spelling, intelligence tests, working memory, short-term memory, and other motor difficulties. So what you see, hi, thank you so much, thank you so much, thank you so much. So you do all of this during a dyslexia assessment. So the person, before the assessment day though, you will need to fill some certain forms because background information is so important. You need to look at what has gone on before now, and there are many signs that would have been there from when the child was very little. And of course, you also want to rule out some things, in their development when they were little. So you want information about when did they start to speak, did they misrepresent some sounds, what difficulties do they have? They have difficulty with tying their shoelaces, are they clumsy, do they have concentration issues, attention, are they hyperactive? Is there a discrepancy between the level of oral ability and their written ability? Now, that's a good indication that there might be something going on. So you generally should have a form that the school fills, and there are a lot of questions that the school, you ask the teachers so that you know what they are doing, what are they currently doing, and what have they been doing, also helps you to see if the child has been receiving some sort of support. Again, that's why I said dyslexia assessment is in the domain of someone that is trained for it, because when you look at the test scores, this is like a puzzle. When you put all of it together, a picture forms before you, and you want to see the picture of the child. Even if it's had, some sort of support, you should see where the support has affected and, how well that child has done and what more you need to do. So background information is so important. So you get information from school, and you get information from the parents. And then on the day of assessment itself, of course, and I'm basically talking about what's going to happen at Dyslexia Nigeria. This should happen really anywhere that they do real diagnostic assessment. So when you come in that day, you will have another conversation, like a consultation with the assessor. And the assessor, again, will have to ask specific questions that relate to school work, the current difficulties, and all of that. And then the assessments will begin, of course, usually in a quiet screening room with no disturbance, no distractions. We want to be sure that what the person has done is their attainment for that day. Some people are easily distracted and disturbed, so usually you don't book many assessments, in fact maybe not more than 1 or 2 a day, and so it's quiet, one assessor to the assessee. And so you go through all the psychometric materials. So you're going through intelligence tests, like I said, full memory tests. You're looking at working memory in particular, short-term memory as well. You're looking at their attainment in reading and writing, how well can they put their ideas down on paper, and you're looking at all of that. Oh, by the way, if you have any questions, please just pop it in the chat box, or this is not Zoom. Whatever, just type it in and I can address any questions that you may have. And so assessments will usually take anywhere between 4 to 8 hours. And that would be dependent on the child or whoever it is that you're assessing, and so the test that you're assigned for them, their age, and how quickly they work as well. But of course, it's not in a stretch, but usually it would take about 5 hours, but I have conducted some assessment that went even beyond that time. But then there are breaks in between, so you give several breaks as you go, and sometimes that stretches the time a bit, but usually it takes anywhere between 4 to 6, 7 hours, depending on the person. So it takes time to look at all the various aspects of things that that relate to dyslexia. And once that is then finished, the assessment is done. And then, of course, scoring up the report and writing the report itself. It wouldn't take less than 10 hours of work to put the report together. So usually the report cannot be ready, if you're really, really good, maybe 2 weeks, okay, or slightly less, but you do need time to do all the calculations. There's a lot of statistics going on there. You want to now find out, and I'll tell you a bit about the report in a minute, but it takes time to have a proper report put together. Now, the report itself should contain information about what you have found, the history. So why is this person, why have they come up with why have they requested an assessment at this time? What are they currently struggling with? What is the history? What is the background? What is the test that has been done? What psychometric tests did you use? What did you find? What are the results? And then from the results, you then would make recommendations. So you have a summary, you have conclusions, and then you make recommendations. Now, the recommendations are the really important part of the assessment, because at the end of the day, we want to find out if the person is dyslexic. Yes, the report should say this person shows all of the signs of dyslexia and is dyslexic. You can say has mild dyslexia, moderate or severe dyslexia. Okay, fine, then what? So the report should also say what you should do going forward. And sometimes, of course, the report will tell you if the person will require some sort of accommodations in exams and accommodations in the classroom. All of those will come under the recommendations. But, here you are. You have the assessment report in front of you, usually about 20 pages. And you're like, how do I interpret this? What does this mean? And then, there's simple things to do to help you understand what a dyslexia assessment report looks like. There's some things, again, that are important. So you interpret the report, one, as, say, percentiles, and two, we're looking at standard scores. So when you do a test, a general test, your basic score on the test is your raw score. So if you got 4 out of 10, 6 out of 10, 9 out of 10, that's just your raw score. Now, we want a situation where we can compare you to other people the same age as you. And this is one of the things why a diagnostic assessment is important, because the tests you're using are standardized. It means that they would give the same results for the age group all of the time. So they're reliable, they're valid, and they're standardized. Okay, and that means that they've also administered them to people of that age group, so many of them. And this is what we find, that the range for attainment is this. And I'll tell you a bit about standard scores. So you want to convert the raw scores to standard scores. Now, standard scores will help us see where you are in relation to your peers. Don't forget that all of these attributes, what we want to see is the person achieving at an average level, at a below average level, or at an above average level. Now, if you are average, hey, it seems it's okay. No, but we're not all going to be exactly the same. So long as you fall into the average band, you're fine. Now, most of these scores are, they're interpreted as under what we call the bell curve or the normal curve. Okay, so any attribute in life usually falls under the bell curve. Let's look at height of women, for instance. Averagely, women probably, maybe height of Nigerian women, maybe anywhere between 5'4" and say 5'8". That's about the average. Now you're going to get, that's that range. So average is the range. And then you're going to have some people that will fall below that. So some people will be shorter than that, of course. They're still normal, they're just shorter. And some people will be taller than that. But most people would be in the average band, anywhere between 5'4" and say 5'10". Most people, most women will be there. And it's the same when we're looking at the scores, when we're looking at the dyslexia assessment. It will say your score on reading, for instance, reading fluency. Is your score average for children your age, or is it below average or above average? And when you look at the standard scores, I mean, we don't want to go into statistics here really, but the average band usually falls between 85 to 115 average. So when you get an assessment report of scores, you want to look at your standard scores on each of the attributes that is being assessed. Is it falling close to 85 or below 85? Or is it above 150, or is it within that range? If it's within the range, we say it's average. Or then it can be below average or significantly below average. Or it can be above average or significantly above average. So all of these areas that we're testing, whether it's working memory, whether it's reading, writing, spelling, comprehension, composition, whether it's processing speed, whether it's phonological awareness, phonological memory, all of those areas we want to see, are your scores average, below average, or above average? And so so the calculations are made, and that's basically what we're looking at. Now, there is a profile that is what we call a dyslexic profile. If you're a dyslexia assessor, you understand what the dyslexic profile looks like. And so by the time you've done the tests and you've run all the statistics and you've gotten the scores, then you converted them to standard score, a picture will begin to be painted in front of you, okay? Another way, of course, you can interpret results is also with the percentiles. Now, a lot more people are familiar with percentile because it sounds like percentage, really, and we're all used to this percentage thing, 10 out of 10%, 20%, 30%. We have an idea average that 50% is like average. But sometimes it will tell you, oh, 40% can still be accepted. But when you're looking at percentile, it's like if I took children of the same age and we lined them up on a queue from 1 to 100, then the percentile is the position on that queue. So if I say your score is at the 20th percentile, it means that about 80 people scored better than that score. So if it's at 15th percentile, 20th percentile, averagely, if you're scoring 20th percentile or below, you see an area of difficulty, serious difficulty. But again, an assessor is trained to also look at your scores in relation to your intelligence, because then it matters. You see, many times intelligence and reading grow together. And when a person is struggling, then reading begins to decline even as intelligence grows. And so you want to look at so many of these factors together. What is going on in the background? Is anybody else in the family having the same difficulty? Dyslexia is inherited. And then you're looking at all the scores. How well did they process information? How well how strong is their memory? How rapidly can they bring information back? Can they read through a material? How fluently? Can they comprehend what they are reading? Some people believe, or they feel like, because they can say the words on a paper, that they're all right with reading. But reading itself is a process. You start with learning the letter names and the letter sounds, marrying that together, and then being able to manipulate that, then putting it together. You blend the sounds. Once you're able to blend the sound, you can say the word, and then you can say the word accurately. Okay, now you can say the word accurately. When we put many words together, you can say it accurately, quickly, so that your fluency is also high, and then that allows you to comprehend. So if you can manipulate letters and sounds, awesome. How well can you decode the words? How quickly? If I gave you a word you haven't seen before, how quickly can you decode that word? Because if you're decoding a lot of your words, your fluency again will be affected, and then it will affect comprehension. So some people say, well, I can read. It's not that I can read. Dyslexic individuals can read, and they read very well. They can read. They have the possibility to be able to read well. But again, without the right support, reading can be a problem. And we always say that you learn to read when you're little. By the time you get to like grade 4, you need to do a switch to reading to learn. Now, if you haven't learned how to read well, you cannot switch to reading to learn. And then it becomes a problem, because the more information you have, the more materials you need to read, the more the problems will show. So reading to learn is what we do with every other type of learning that we're doing. We're basically reading to learn. Okay, and so you have to be able to comprehend what you're reading. So if you're having problems with comprehension, you're still having problem with reading. That's what it is. Because you can read the words off the page does not mean you're not struggling with reading. If you cannot comprehend what you're reading, or you need to read over and over and over and over and over before you get the gist of what you're reading, you are struggling with reading. Okay, so when you've got all these results, you look at the standard scores, you look at the percentile, it paints a picture for the assessor. Now, what is your memory like? The assessor will look at that level and decide on an intervention that will help. What is reading like? Are you struggling with spelling? What can we do to teach you spelling? What strategies is important? How often should we do this? What program should we use when you're struggling with reading? Usually with dyslexia, it has to be a multisensory program. But which multisensory program should you use? How frequently? Many times when I do assessments and I make recommendations, I say, look, you need to use this particular program. And you need to do it this particular way. If I say you need to be addressed using this program, say up to 40 minutes a day for at least 5 days, you need to do just that. Because you see, it's almost like medication as well. If a doctor says take your medication once in the morning, once at night for 6 days, you need to take it like that. There needs to be a degree of consistency. With learning to read and overcoming some of the problems. It's not enough to do one day today, forget tomorrow. We're working on it, but we're really not working on it. The school is not on board. It's important that you're looking at the recommendations and then you're translating the recommendations. So now the report is ready. You send the report to the parent or the adult, the person or the client. The person will then need to have a review session with the assessor to explain what the report is saying and to explain how to go about the recommendations, what resources to use, what materials to get, how the teaching should be done, what is required, what is this soup that we have cooked up that the person will need to take in. So how much of is it phonological awareness that we need to concentrate on? Is it spelling? Is it the spelling strategies? Is it comprehension? What are the strategies we're going to teach you? Is it technology? Do we need to throw in some technology? Because at the end of the day, if a person is struggling to read, we must not place them in a situation where they are also finding it difficult to gain knowledge. Knowledge is so important. However way you take knowledge in, knowledge is important. So if a person is struggling with reading, while we're remediating the reading, what can we do in the meantime? Can we use audiobooks? Can we use reading pens, to help reading even as we're remediating the reading? So there's a lot of things that go into the recommendations that the assessor would make. They would also look at your recommendations for exam access arrangements and accommodations in the classroom. So if a person is achieving below certain level in any speed, what I mean is any speed of reading, so it's like speed of reading, speed of writing, or speed of processing. If you're below average there and to different degrees of deficiencies, then you can get recommendation for extra time in an exam. So if, for instance, your scores are 84 below to about 70 something, you can get 25% extra time, and they would make that recommendation for you. If it's below that, you can even get up to 50% extra time in exams. But again, the report the assessment must be carried out by someone that's trained for it, because they will need to see that the person that's doing that assessment has the qualification to make this recommendation. So again, it's important that the right person is doing the assessment and that you understand the assessment report and you know what next to do. There's some things to add here before. I didn't think that would take an hour, but it's almost taken an hour now. There's some things to add here, especially for parents that are taking children to assessments or for assessments. I think it's important that the parents let the children know where they're going, what they're going to do. It's okay to tell a child, we're going to see someone that is good at helping people learn, that is good at helping people read better or write better or be better at school. And not just saying we're going to see a doctor. Because many times the children come in and they're scared. They think they're going to get the injection, or they're going to be wired up somehow, or maybe they've even done something wrong. I think it's important that before they come in for the assessment, that the parents lets them know this person has a specialty in helping people learn and helping them learn how to read really well. And we just want to see if there's anything more that she can do for you or he can do for you, because then it helps the children to be more at ease with what is to come in terms of the assessment. What else do I want to say about assessment? Let me see. I think those are the main things. The important thing is that we should get assessed for dyslexia correctly, get the right assessment, so that you can see what your profile looks like. No two dyslexic is exactly the same. So we're looking at, like I said, short-term memory, working memory, processing speed, rapid naming. I mean, to different degrees. It's like, you know, some people will be fine with the memory, but they're not good with this. Or this is low and this is low, so it's affecting this. Or the speed is low, so it's affecting comprehension. You know, it's a different mix. And of course, also the environment that the person is in is also a different mix. So it's important that each person gets their own assessment. You don't say, oh, your daughter had an assessment. Please, what did they recommend there? What's the recommendation? What did they say they should do? Okay, just tell me, I'll do the same. No, that doesn't work. You need to know what is your levels, what is your profile looking like, what is your picture, what is your story, and that is what we direct, you know, or plan an intervention around for you. You know, don't just listen to what someone else has said. Try to get an assessment of your own. Like I said, dyslexia assessments are quite important, and they help us know the way forward. For schools, I expect that schools have, you know, they probably have seen some sort of degree of struggle. They've also probably done some response to intervention. They've tried to do a bit of intervention, maybe support, extra lessons, but then they see that, you know, things are still not going as well. Then they just do a referral to the center and say, okay, please, this person needs an assessment. Of course, dyslexia can co-occur with other things, and sometimes a dyslexia assessment can be expanded to include a few other things, because dyslexia most of the time co-occurs with other things. About 40% of the time, 40 to 50% of the time, it occurs with ADHD. That's attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. So sometimes you find where you do what we call an add-on. You also do an ADHD screening just to see, you know, if those levels of the executive functionings are also low, what can we do to bring them to, you know, higher levels. Okay. And sometimes dyslexia can occur with difficulty with math and numbers, so that's dyscalculia. Again, you have some people that say, okay, let's also throw in the dyscalculia test to see if the person is also struggling with numbers. And dyslexia can co-occur with a difficulty with handwriting, okay? And you've taught the child, you've done regular handwriting in school, but the handwriting is like hardly legible. You know, again, you may need to do specific intervention for handwriting. So dyslexia can co-occur with other things as well. And sometimes you then also throw in like an executive functioning test just to see what those levels are also like. So, hey, I hope you've learned something today. I don't know if you have any questions for me. I'm happy to take them around dyslexia. And dyslexia assessment in particular, like I said at the beginning, because a lot of people have been asking me, what do you do doing an assessment? Why does it take this long? It takes 5 hours, it takes so long to do, you know. I know someone that does, I mean, they tell me, I know someone that does the dyslexia assessment, so 30 minutes, 40 minutes, they're done. I'm like, they're not doing a dyslexia assessment. You know, if you're trying to do these things, it can never take that short a time. You can do a screening, of course. A screening will give you a lot of false negatives and false positives. Again, you want to be able to look at the pictures and the profile critically so that you can plan an intervention. I don't know, yeah, that's it from me today. Do you have any questions? I'm happy to take your questions. Otherwise, I know we probably need to go and get ready. Tomorrow is election day. Like I said at the beginning, you have your PVCs. You want to go and put in a showing tomorrow. So, hey, if there are no questions, it's going to be it from me today. And it's been wonderful being here. I hope you learned something. Again, don't forget, if you or anyone around you is showing signs of dyslexia, feel free to contact us at Dyslexia Nigeria. I don't know the numbers offhand, I'm sorry. But you can find them on all of our pages and our website, www.dyslexianigeria.com. If you want to schedule an appointment for a consultation, or you want to schedule an appointment for an assessment, feel free to do that. Follow us on social media. We're really here to help. We're really here to help. We have resources, we have the expertise, and and we really can help you with dyslexia, okay? All right, so that's all from me. It's been a wonderful time. 50 minutes, awesome. And next week, of course, you'd have another guest. I know today you've been stuck with me. I hope it wasn't too bad. Next week we'll have another awesome guest coming to talk about their struggle with dyslexia, what they're doing to help themselves, and something that you can learn from. Okay, so in the meantime, I don't think I can see any questions here. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not doing this thing properly, but thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Appreciate it. We appreciate it here at Dyslexia Nigeria. We're wishing you all the very best as you go forward, and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye. Bye. So this is me signing out. All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you. Okay, now I don't know how to turn this off. Oh, dear. What am I supposed to do here? I don't know how to turn it off.